I refused to give my sons $200,000. 2 days later, his new black wife's special coffee exposed them. My chest tightened. In 43 years of motherhood, Michael had never asked me to visit him. I'd always been the one suggesting trips, begging for time together. Now suddenly he wanted me to pack up and drive 4 hours to Atlanta? Have you ever had your gut scream, "Don't drink that"? Hi viewers, kindly tell us where you're watching from and what time it is. Warm welcome to the family, enjoy the story. The coffee cup sat steaming before me, prepared with love by my son's new wife, but my gut screamed danger. In that moment, I realized the two people I trusted most in this world were about to destroy me. What they put in my coffee wasn't sugar, it was the key to stealing my life savings and possibly ending my life. Have you ever felt your instincts scream, "Run," when everyone around you is smiling? Have you ever trusted someone completely, only to discover they were plotting against you? Has your own family ever made you question everything you believed about love? Today, I'm sharing how my son and his wife almost succeeded in the perfect crime, using my own motherly love against me. Stay with me, because what saved my life was one simple decision that any mother could make. If family betrayal has ever shattered your world, you need to hear this story. Let me take you back to where this nightmare began, with a phone call that should have been a blessing. When your grown son calls crying about needing $200,000, you know something's terribly wrong, but you never expect it to be what I discovered. It was 6:15 a.m. on a Tuesday morning in Richmond, Virginia. I was stirring my morning tea, watching the sunrise paint my kitchen walls golden, when the phone rang. 43 years of motherhood had taught me to recognize trouble by the sound of the ring itself. This wasn't Michael's usual Sunday check-in call. This was desperate. "Ma?" His voice cracked like he was 12 years old again, not 35. "What's wrong, baby?" I set down my cup, already reaching for my robe. "I need help. I need money. A lot of money." The words tumbled out in a rush. Business troubles. Bad investments. Creditors calling. His wife Denise crying every night. They were going to lose everything, the house, the cars, her respect. He needed $200,000, and he needed it fast. Now, let me tell you something about $200,000. That was 40 years of my life right there. 40 years of 12-hour shifts at the cotton mill in Raleigh. 40 years of working weekends as a nurse in Virginia Beach hospitals. 40 years of choosing generic cereal and mending clothes instead of buying new ones. Every dollar I'd saved was soaked in sweat and sacrifice. "Michael, honey, that's my entire retirement fund." "I know, Ma. I know. But I'll pay you back. Every penny. With interest." His voice broke again, and I heard something in the background, a woman's voice, soft and encouraging. "Denise. My new daughter-in-law, the smart city girl from Detroit who'd swept my country boy off his feet 6 months ago." I'd only met Denise twice. Once at their wedding in Atlanta, where she'd worn a dress that cost more than my monthly pension. She'd hugged me tight and called me Mama Ruth, which should have felt sweet but somehow felt calculated. The second time was at Christmas, when she'd given me expensive lotion that smelled like flowers I couldn't name and looked at my little Virginia house like it was a museum exhibit. But she made Michael happy. Or so I thought. "Ma, are you there?" "I'm here, baby. I'm thinking." "Don't think too long. I need an answer by Friday." "Friday. 3 days away." I pressed my fingers to my temple, feeling a headache building. Here's what you need to understand about being a single mother: you learn to read between the lines. When Michael was 7 and said he fell down the stairs, I knew Tommy Henderson had pushed him. When he was 16 and said he was studying at Jenny's house, I knew they were doing everything except studying. A mother's instinct is sharper than any knife, and right now, mine was cutting through his words to find the truth underneath. Something wasn't right. "Michael, what kind of business trouble? You never told me you were having problems." A pause. Too long of a pause. "It's complicated, Ma. Real estate deals gone bad. You wouldn't understand. Wouldn't understand? I'd been managing money since before he was born. I'd turned a widow's pension into a six-figure retirement fund. I'd bought and paid off my house while working 2 jobs and raising him alone. But suddenly I wouldn't understand? Try me. Another pause. In the background, I heard Denise again, closer now. Whispering something. Urgent. Look, Ma, I can't explain everything over the phone. Can you come down? To Atlanta? Maybe stay a few days? Denise would love to have you, and we can talk about everything face to face. My chest tightened. In 43 years of motherhood, Michael had never asked me to visit him. I'd always been the one suggesting trips, begging for time together. Now suddenly he wanted me to pack up and drive 4 hours to Atlanta? When? Tomorrow? Tonight if you can manage it. I looked around my quiet kitchen. My cat, Whiskers, was cleaning himself on the windowsill. My bills were stacked neatly on the counter, all paid. My garden needed weeding, but it could wait. I had no real reason not to go except for the knot forming in my stomach. All right. I'll drive down tomorrow morning. Great. That's great, Ma. Denise is so excited. She's already planning your favorite meals. How did Denise know what my favorite meals were? We'd shared exactly 2 dinners together, both at restaurants. Michael? Yeah? I love you, baby. You know that, right? Whatever's going on, we'll figure it out together. Silence stretched between us like a bridge I wasn't sure would hold my weight. I love you too, Ma. See you tomorrow. The line went dead, and I stared at the phone in my hand. Something was wrong. Not just wrong, dangerous. Every instinct I developed over 7 decades of living was screaming at me to stay home, to keep my money in the bank, to protect myself. But he was my son. My only child. The baby I'd rocked through fevers and nightmares. The boy I'd cheered for at Little League games and graduation ceremonies. The man I'd prayed would find happiness and success. How could I refuse him now? I finished my tea and started packing, ignoring the voice in my head that kept whispering one word over and over: trap. Have you ever had your gut scream, "Don't drink that"? Because mine did, and that single decision cracked their secret wide open. Meeting Denise for the first time as her houseguest was like walking into a movie set where I was the only one who didn't know the script. The drive to Atlanta gave me 4 hours to think, and by the time I pulled into their driveway, my head was spinning with questions. Their house sat in one of those neighborhoods where every lawn looked painted green and every mailbox matched. Money. Real money. The kind I'd never had growing up in rural North Carolina. If they lived like this, why did they need mine? Denise answered the door before I could knock, like she'd been watching through the window. She was beautiful in that sharp, polished way city women manage, every hair in place, makeup perfect even at 10 a.m., wearing clothes that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. Mama Ruth. She wrapped me in a hug that smelled like expensive perfume and felt like a performance. I'm so glad you're here. Michael's been pacing all morning. She led me through rooms that belonged in magazines. White furniture that looked too clean to sit on. Glass tables that reflected everything twice. Flowers arranged just so in vases that probably cost more than my car payment. You have a beautiful home, I said, setting my overnight bag down carefully. Thank you. I've worked very hard for all of this. Something in her tone made me look at her twice. Pride, yes, but also something else. Hunger, maybe. Like she was still working, still reaching for more. Michael appeared from what looked like an office, his face tight with stress. He hugged me, but his hands were shaking. How was the drive, Ma? Fine, baby. Now tell me what's really going on. Denise and Michael exchanged a look. One of those married couple looks that passes information without words. I'd had those looks with Michael's father, back when we were young and thought we had forever. Let's sit down, Denise said, guiding me to the white couch. Can I get you anything? Coffee? Tea? Water's fine. She disappeared into the kitchen, and I used the moment to study my son. Really study him. He'd lost weight. Dark circles under his eyes. His clothes were expensive but wrinkled, like he'd been sleeping in them. Michael, when's the last time you ate a real meal? Ma, that's not important right now. Everything's important when it comes to taking care of yourself. Denise returned with a crystal glass of water and settled beside Michael like a cat claiming territory. Her hand found his knee, fingers drumming against the fabric of his pants. Nervous energy. Mama Ruth, we need to be honest with you about our situation. I waited. Michael's company invested in some properties in Florida. The market crashed, and now we owe more than the buildings are worth. Much more. This was the first I'd heard about Florida properties. Or a company, for that matter. Last I knew, Michael worked in insurance. What kind of properties? Another look between them. Condos, Michael said quickly. Beach condos. We thought they'd be gold mines, but hurricane season scared off all the buyers. Condos. Beach properties. My son, who'd never owned anything bigger than a pickup truck, was suddenly a real estate investor. How much do you owe? Including penalties and interest? Denise's voice dropped to a whisper. Almost $300,000. The number hit me like a slap. $300,000. More money than I'd see in 3 lifetimes. And you need my $200,000 for what, exactly? To stop the foreclosure process, Michael said. If we can pay down the debt, show good faith, maybe negotiate a payment plan. What about your jobs? Your savings? Denise looked away. We've already emptied everything. Retirement accounts, savings, even borrowed against the house. I looked around the pristine living room again. If they'd emptied their savings, how were they maintaining this lifestyle? Denise, what do you do for work? I'm a marketing consultant. But business has been slow. And you, Michael? Insurance. But commissions are down. None of this added up. Slow business, empty savings accounts, massive debts. Yet here they sat in a house that screamed money, wearing clothes that cost more than my monthly pension. I need to think about this, I said. Of course, Denise said quickly. That's why we wanted you here. So we could talk it through properly. Show you all the paperwork. Paperwork. Yes, I definitely wanted to see paperwork. Why don't you rest a bit? Michael suggested. We've set up the guest room for you. Tonight we'll cook dinner, just like old times, and go over everything. The guest room was perfect, like everything else in the house. Too perfect. Like a hotel room that had never been lived in. I sat on the edge of the bed and tried to make sense of what I'd just heard. My son needed $200,000 to save himself from a bad investment I'd never heard of. He was living in a house that suggested money while claiming poverty. His wife spoke in exact figures and watched my face like she was calculating something. And through it all, that voice in my head kept whispering, something's not right. I unpacked my small bag, hanging my 2 dresses in a closet bigger than my bedroom back home. As I closed the closet door, I caught sight of myself in the mirror. 71 years old. Gray hair that needed touching up. Clothes from discount stores. Hands rough from 4 decades of work. Next to Denise's polished perfection, I looked like exactly what I was, a small-town widow with a savings account that represented her entire security. How do you read people when you first meet them? What red flags do you watch for? Because I was starting to see them everywhere. Some truths only come out after midnight, when people think the world is sleeping. I couldn't sleep. The guest bed was too soft, the house too quiet, and my mind wouldn't stop churning over the day's conversations. Something about their story felt rehearsed, like they'd practiced it in front of a mirror until every word sounded natural. At 1:30 a.m., I gave up pretending to sleep and decided to get some water. My throat was dry from all the questions I'd swallowed instead of asking. The hallway was dark except for a thin line of light coming from under the kitchen door. Voices. Low, urgent voices that stopped the moment I stepped on that one creaky floorboard every old house seems to have. I froze, listening. Can't keep stalling. Denise's voice, barely above a whisper. I know. But she's not stupid. She's asking too many questions. My heart stopped. They were talking about me. I pressed myself against the wall, grateful for 40 years of sneaking around this house as a mother, checking on a sick child without waking him. Your mother has more money than she's letting on, Denise continued. I saw her bank statement when she left her purse open. She's got close to $250 in savings, plus that house is worth at least another $100. They looked through my purse. Denise, I can't just. Can't what? Ask your own mother for help? She raised you alone, Michael. She owes you. Owes him? I'd given that boy everything. Every sacrifice, every overtime shift, every dollar I could spare had gone toward his future. It's not that simple. It is that simple. We need that money, and she has it. End of story. But what if she says no? A long pause. My hands were shaking so hard I had to clasp them together to keep quiet. She won't say no. Not if we handle this right. What do you mean, handle this right? Another pause. Longer this time. Your mother is old, Michael. Old and alone. Accidents happen to old people living by themselves. My blood turned to ice. Accidents. Denise, you can't be serious. I'm dead serious. We've got creditors calling every day. Tony's men came by the office yesterday asking about the money we owe them. This isn't some bank we're dealing with, these are dangerous people. Tony's men? What kind of debt involved men making threats? If we don't pay them back soon, we're both dead anyway. At least this way, we solve everything. I can't hurt my mother. You won't have to hurt her. I'll take care of everything. She'll have a nice visit with her loving son, enjoy some home cooking, and then, well, sometimes old hearts just give out. Especially when there's a little help. The floor seemed to tilt under my feet. They were planning to kill me. Murder me. For my money. The insurance policy we took out on her will cover everything we owe, plus give us enough to start fresh somewhere else. Insurance policy? When had they taken out life insurance on me? I don't know if I can do this. You don't have to do anything except act normal. I'll handle the rest. Tomorrow night, I'll make her that coffee she loves, add a little something special to help her sleep forever. By Thursday morning, you'll be a grieving son with a very lucrative inheritance. My legs almost gave out. The coffee. They were going to poison my coffee. What about the investigation? Won't people ask questions? What investigation? She's 71 years old with a history of heart problems. Her own doctor will sign the death certificate without blinking. Natural causes. Heart problems? I'd never had heart problems in my life. Besides, Denise continued, who's going to ask questions? She's got no other family, no close friends. Just a lonely old woman who died peacefully in her sleep at her son's house. If anything, people will think it's sweet that she got to spend her last days with family. The word family in her mouth made me sick. I heard my own name followed by words that made my blood freeze. Once she's gone, everything becomes easier. I needed to get back to the room. Now. Before they discovered me. Each step back down that hallway felt like walking through quicksand. My heart was pounding so loud I was sure they'd hear it from the kitchen. The guest room door seemed miles away. Finally, I made it back inside and closed the door as quietly as possible. I sat on the edge of the bed, shaking. My son, my baby, the child I'd sacrificed everything for, was going to let his wife murder me for money. Not just let her. He was helping plan it. The insurance policy explained everything. They hadn't taken out life insurance to protect me. They'd taken it out to profit from my death. This whole visit, the desperate phone call, the story about failed investments, it was all a setup. I was supposed to die tomorrow night. In my favorite coffee cup, in my son's kitchen, surrounded by lies and fake love. I looked around the guest room with new eyes. This wasn't a comfortable place for me to stay. This was where they'd planned for me to spend my last night alive. The beautiful house, the expensive clothes, the perfect furniture, it was all bought with borrowed money they never intended to pay back. Because dead mothers don't ask for their loans to be repaid. What would you do if you overheard your family planning something terrible? Would you confront them or gather evidence first? I knew one thing for certain, I wasn't going to drink that coffee. But first, I had to survive until morning. And then I had to figure out how to escape the two people I'd trusted most in this world. The people who were planning to kill me with a smile. Pretending everything was normal when you know someone's planning to murder you is the hardest acting job you'll ever have. I woke up Tuesday morning after maybe 2 hours of real sleep. Every sound in the house had me jumping. Footsteps in the hallway, water running in the kitchen, even the hum of the air conditioning sounded threatening. When you know someone wants you dead, every normal noise becomes a weapon. But I had to act like nothing had changed. Like I hadn't overheard them planning my murder. Like I was still the trusting old mother who'd driven down from Virginia to help her struggling son. At 7 a.m., I heard movement in the kitchen. Showtime. I put on my blue dress, the nice one I'd brought for dinners out, and checked my appearance in the mirror. Had to look normal. Happy, even. Like a grandmother excited to spend time with family. The smell of bacon hit me the moment I opened the guest room door. Denise was at the stove, wearing a robe that probably cost more than my monthly electric bill, her hair perfectly styled even first thing in the morning. Michael sat at the kitchen table with coffee and a newspaper, looking like a regular husband on a regular Tuesday. If I hadn't heard their midnight conversation, this scene would have warmed my heart. My son and his wife making breakfast, including me in their morning routine like real family. Instead, it felt like walking into a theater where I was the only one who didn't know I was about to be killed in the final act. Good morning, Mama Ruth. Denise's voice was bright as sunshine. I hope you slept well. I made your favorite, bacon and eggs with grits. How did she know I liked grits? I'd never mentioned grits to her. That's very sweet of you, honey. I slept like a baby. Michael looked up from his newspaper. His eyes were red-rimmed, like maybe he hadn't slept much either. Good. I hoped planning my murder was keeping him awake. Morning, Ma. Coffee? Coffee. The word hit me like a punch to the stomach, but I kept my smile steady. Not just yet. Let me wake up a little more first. I sat down across from him, studying his face. This was the same face I'd kissed goodnight for 18 years. The same boy who'd cried in my arms when his goldfish died. The same young man who'd called me his hero in his high school graduation speech. Now he was planning to watch his wife poison me. So, I said, keeping my voice light, tell me more about these Florida properties. I'd love to see the paperwork. Another glance passed between them. Quick, but I caught it. Of course, Michael said. I've got everything in my office. We can go through it all after breakfast. Denise set a plate in front of me, bacon crispy the way I liked it, eggs over easy, grits with just enough butter. She'd done her homework, I'd give her that. This looks wonderful. Thank you. Anything for family, she said, and her smile was so warm, so genuine looking, that for a split second I almost doubted what I'd heard last night. Almost. Denise, tell me about your family. Your people back in Detroit. She froze for just a moment, spatula halfway to her mouth. Oh, there's not much to tell. My mother died when I was young. Father wasn't around much. I'm sorry to hear that. It must have been hard, growing up without family. It was. But it made me strong. Made me appreciate what I have now. What she had now. Including a plan to murder her mother-in-law for insurance money. And how did you two meet? I asked, looking between them. This was safe territory. I'd heard this story before, at their wedding. Michael had told everyone about meeting Denise at a conference in Birmingham, how she'd been the smartest person in the room. But now Michael looked uncomfortable, like he couldn't remember his lines. It was, at a business meeting, Denise said quickly. I was consulting for his company. That wasn't the story they'd told before. At the wedding, it had been a conference. Now it was a business meeting. Small detail, but lies have a way of shifting when people get nervous. That's nice. Workplace romances can be so sweet. Michael's phone buzzed. He glanced at it and went pale. Excuse me, he said, standing quickly. I need to take this. He disappeared toward his office, leaving me alone with Denise. My would-be murderer, flipping eggs like Betty Crocker. He's been so stressed lately, she said, not turning around. This business with the properties, it's eating him alive. Money troubles can be hard on a marriage. Yes, they can. She turned to face me, and for just a moment, her mask slipped. I saw something cold and calculating in her eyes before the warm smile returned. But family helps family, right? That's what you always taught Michael. Family helps family. She was using my own words, my own values, to manipulate me into funding my own murder. That's right. Family comes first. I'm so glad you understand. She moved closer, refilling my water glass. Michael was worried you might not want to help. You've worked so hard for your money. A mother's money belongs to her children eventually anyway. The words tasted like poison in my mouth, but Denise's eyes lit up. That's exactly what I told him. You raised him to be successful, and now you can help him get back on his feet. Get back on his feet. By stepping over my dead body. Michael returned, his face grim. Everything all right? Denise asked. Fine. Just business. But it wasn't fine. Whatever that phone call was about had rattled him. His hands were shaking as he picked up his coffee cup. So, I said, cutting into my eggs, when do you need an answer about the loan? Soon, Denise said quickly. The sooner the better. How about tonight? After dinner, we can go over all the paperwork, and I'll give you my decision. They exchanged another look. Longer this time. Tonight would be perfect, Denise said. In fact, let me make you a special dinner. Really celebrate having you here. Celebrate. Like it was a party instead of my last meal. That sounds lovely. What are you planning to make? It's a surprise. But I'll make sure to brew that coffee you love so much. There it was. The coffee. Tomorrow night's murder weapon, mentioned so casually I almost missed it. I can't wait. Have you ever had to pretend everything was normal when you knew you were in danger? Because as I sat there eating breakfast with my potential killers, I knew I had less than 12 hours to figure out how to save my own life. The clock on their kitchen wall ticked toward my deadline, and I smiled and nodded and played the part of the trusting mother while my mind raced through escape plans. Because when Denise offered to make my favorite coffee tonight, I knew this was the moment everything would change forever. The moment of truth came at 8 p.m., right after dinner, when Denise smiled sweetly and asked if I wanted my coffee. Dinner had been a nightmare of fake smiles and forced conversation. Denise had made pot roast, another one of my favorites that I'd never mentioned to her. Michael picked at his food like a man walking to his own execution, which I guess he was, in a way. Every bite felt like swallowing glass, knowing this was supposed to be my last meal. That was delicious, honey, I said, setting down my fork. You're such a good cook. Thank you, Mama Ruth. Now, how about that coffee? I got your favorite blend, French vanilla. I'd never told her I liked French vanilla. My heart hammered against my ribs as she stood up, clearing dishes with movements that looked casual but felt choreographed. This was it. The moment they'd planned for. The moment I was supposed to die. Coffee sounds perfect, I managed. Michael couldn't meet my eyes. He stared at his empty plate like it might tell him how to live with himself after watching his mother get murdered. Michael, why don't you show your mother those Florida property papers while I make the coffee? Denise's voice was honey-sweet. I'll bring it to the living room when it's ready. She wanted me away from the kitchen. Away from watching her prepare my poison. Good idea, Michael said, jumping up like the chair was on fire. Ma, come on. Let me show you what we're dealing with. In the living room, Michael spread papers across the coffee table with hands that shook so bad the documents rustled. Bank statements. Property deeds. Legal documents that looked official but felt wrong somehow. See here? He pointed to numbers that swam before my eyes. We owe $287,000 on these condos, but they're only worth $150,000 now. I wasn't really listening. My attention was focused on the kitchen, where I could hear Denise moving around. Cabinet doors opening and closing. The coffee maker gurgling to life. The soft sound of a spoon against ceramic. The spoon that was stirring my death. Michael, I said quietly, look at me. He glanced up, then away quickly. Baby, I need you to look at your mother. Slowly, he raised his eyes to mine. What I saw there broke my heart into 1,000 pieces. Guilt. Fear. Shame. But also something else, resignation. He'd already decided to let this happen. Do you remember when you were 8 and Tommy Henderson broke your arm? Ma, what does that have to do with? Do you remember what I told you in the hospital? His face crumpled slightly. You said you'd never let anyone hurt me as long as you were alive. That's right. And I meant it. I worked 3 jobs to pay those hospital bills. I sat by your bed for 4 days straight. I would have fought a grizzly bear to keep you safe. Tears started rolling down his cheeks. I know, Ma. Then tell me something. If I loved you that much, enough to sacrifice everything for you, how did you decide it was okay to let someone hurt me? His face went white. For a moment, I thought he might confess everything. Might grab my hand and run out that front door with me. Instead, he looked away. I don't know what you mean. The smell of coffee drifted in from the kitchen. Rich and dark and deadly. Coffee's ready. Denise called out in that bright, cheerful voice that made my skin crawl. She appeared in the doorway carrying a tray with 3 cups. Mine was the blue one, my favorite color. How thoughtful of her to poison me in a cup I'd find pretty. Here we go. She set the tray down on the coffee table, right next to Michael's fake property papers. French vanilla, just how you like it. The cup sat there between us like a loaded gun. I stared at that coffee, steam rising from the surface, innocent looking as could be, and felt the weight of every decision I'd ever made as a mother. Every sacrifice. Every sleepless night. Every dollar saved. Every prayer whispered over this boy's sleeping head. All of it had led to this moment. To this cup. To this choice between trust and survival. Go ahead, Mama Ruth, Denise urged. Try it. I added a little something special. I'll bet you did. I picked up the cup. It was warm in my hands. Normal coffee warmth. If I didn't know better, I'd think it was just a thoughtful gesture from my daughter-in-law. Instead, it was my execution. Michael watched me like a man watching a car accident he couldn't stop. His face was gray, his hands clenched so tight his knuckles were white. Denise watched me like a cat watching a mouse. Patient. Confident. Already counting her insurance money. I brought the cup halfway to my lips. Wait, Michael said suddenly. Both Denise and I froze. What? Denise's voice was sharp. Maybe Ma wants cream? You know how she likes cream in her coffee. I'd never put cream in coffee in my life. But my son was trying to save me. Finally, at the last possible second, whatever was left of his conscience was fighting back. She likes it black, Denise said firmly. Don't you, Mama Ruth? The cup trembled in my hands. Not from age. From rage. This woman, this stranger who'd married my son 6 months ago, was sitting in her fancy living room, wearing her expensive clothes, telling me how I liked my coffee while she watched me prepare to drink poison. And my son, my baby, was sitting right there letting it happen. Something inside me hardened to steel. I looked straight at Denise and smiled the sweetest grandmother smile I could manage. You know what, honey? You're absolutely right. I do like it black. I brought the cup to my lips. Denise leaned forward slightly, excitement barely hidden behind her fake concern. Michael closed his eyes. I tilted the cup. And then, at the last possible second, I pretended to stumble. Oh! I gasped, letting the entire cup spill across Michael's precious property papers. I'm so clumsy. I'm so sorry. Hot coffee soaked through the documents, spreading across the white papers like a dark stain. Like the truth finally coming to light. Denise jumped up. No. The papers. But I was watching her face, and what I saw there told me everything I needed to know. She wasn't worried about coffee-stained documents. She was furious that her murder weapon was now splattered across the coffee table instead of down my throat. I'm so sorry, I repeated, reaching for napkins. Let me help clean this up. Don't worry about it, Michael said quickly. He looked like he might faint with relief. They're just copies. Just copies. Of course they were. Because this whole thing was fake. The business troubles. The desperate need for money. The property investments. All of it was lies designed to make me hand over my life savings before they killed me. Well, Denise said, her voice tight with control, let me make you another cup. Oh, that's okay. I'm not really thirsty anymore. All this excitement, you know. She stared at me for a long moment. And in that stare, I saw her trying to figure out if I'd spilled the coffee on purpose. Are you sure? It's no trouble. I'm sure. But thank you, honey. You're so thoughtful. The word thoughtful tasted like acid in my mouth. That night, as I lay in the guest bed listening to them argue in hushed voices down the hall, I knew 3 things for certain. 1, they were planning to try again tomorrow. 2, I had maybe 12 hours to figure out how to escape. 3, the moment I set down that untouched cup, I saw something flicker across Denise's face, and I knew she knew that I knew. What would you do if you had to trust your gut against all logic? What saved you when your own family became your enemy? Sometimes the truth comes out all at once, like a dam bursting. And sometimes you have to drag it out piece by piece, like pulling teeth from a liar's mouth. Wednesday morning came too soon and not soon enough. I'd spent most of the night staring at the ceiling, listening for footsteps in the hallway, wondering if they'd try to kill me in my sleep instead of waiting for coffee time. But I woke up alive, which meant they were sticking to their original plan. Probably figured the coffee spilling was just an accident, and tonight they'd try again. They were wrong. At breakfast, the tension was thick enough to cut with a butter knife. Denise kept glancing at me like she was trying to read my mind. Michael looked like he hadn't slept at all, which he probably hadn't, considering he was planning to become an orphan for money. Sleep well, Mama Ruth? Denise asked, setting eggs in front of me. Like a baby. Thank you for asking. I ate slowly, buying time to think. They expected me to act normal today, then drink poisoned coffee tonight. Instead, I was going to force their hand. You know, I said, setting down my fork, I've been thinking about this money situation all night. Both of them went still. And I've decided. I want to see everything. All the paperwork. Bank statements. The original property purchases. Insurance documents. Everything. Michael's face went pale. Ma, that's a lot of paperwork. Might be boring for you. Honey, I didn't get to 71 by being afraid of paperwork. I want to understand exactly where my money's going before I hand over my life savings. Of course, Denise said smoothly. We want you to feel completely comfortable with everything. Good. And I want to call my bank this morning. Set up the transfer properly. Make sure everything's legal and documented. Another glance between them. Quick and panicked. Your bank? Michael asked. Well, yes. $200,000 is a significant transfer. I'll need to speak with my financial advisor, make sure the paperwork is in order. You understand. What I really wanted was to get someone else involved. A witness. Someone who knew where I was and what I was doing. Actually, Denise said carefully, it might be better to handle this privately. Between family. Banks ask so many questions, and there might be tax implications. Tax implications. This woman really thought I was stupid. Honey, I've been dealing with banks longer than you've been alive. I know how to transfer money legally. Her mask slipped for just a second. I saw annoyance flash across her face before the sweet smile returned. Of course. Whatever makes you comfortable. Wonderful. Michael, can I use your phone to call my bank? Ma, maybe we should wait until. Wait for what? I thought this was urgent. Didn't you say the creditors were calling every day? Trapped by his own lies, Michael nodded reluctantly. You're right. The phone's in the kitchen. I stood up, pushing back from the table. Actually, I'd prefer to use my cell phone. More private. But I'll need those property documents first. All of them. They're in my office, Michael said. Let me get them for you. I'll come with you. Want to see your workspace? His office was neat as a pin, which should have been my first clue. Michael had never been neat in his life. His childhood room looked like a tornado hit it most days. But this office was perfect. Too perfect. Like a stage set. Here we are, he said, pulling out a file folder. Everything's in here. I opened the folder and started reading. The first document was a property deed for a condo in Panama City, Florida. Looked official enough. Then I noticed the date. Michael, this says you bought this property 3 months ago. That's right. But you've been married to Denise for 6 months. When did you start investing in real estate? His mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. It was her idea. She knows about these things. I kept reading. Purchase price, $180,000. Current value according to the bank, $95,000. A loss of $85,000 in 3 months. Honey, what kind of property loses half its value in 3 months? The market's been really bad. No market's this bad. Not unless the building fell into the ocean. I flipped to the next page. Another condo. Same story. Bought high 3 months ago, now worth almost nothing. Michael, these numbers don't make sense. Denise appeared in the doorway. Is everything okay? I'm just trying to understand how you lost so much money so fast. Like we explained, the market crashed. The market didn't crash. I watched the news. Property values in Florida have been steady all year. Silence. I kept reading. Page after page of bad investments, all made within the last 3 months. All losing ridiculous amounts of money. All signed by both Michael and Denise. Then I found something interesting. Insurance policies. Life insurance policies. On me. 3 different companies. 3 different policies. All taken out within the last 2 months. Total value, $750,000. My hand started shaking. What is this? I held up the insurance documents. More silence. You took out life insurance on me? Without telling me? Ma, we just wanted to make sure you were protected. Protected? Michael, these policies pay out $750,000 when I die. That's more than my house and savings combined. The room was so quiet I could hear my own heartbeat. And they were all taken out after you got married. After you supposedly started having these business troubles. I looked back and forth between them. Michael couldn't meet my eyes. Denise was staring at me with an expression I'd never seen before. Cold. Calculating. Completely without warmth. There's no real estate business, is there? I asked quietly. No answer. There are no condos in Florida. Still nothing. This whole thing, the phone call, the desperate need for money, bringing me down here, it's all been about these insurance policies. Finally, Denise spoke. You don't understand. We're in real trouble. Dangerous people are looking for us. We need that money to disappear. What dangerous people? The kind that break legs first and ask questions later. Michael finally found his voice. Ma, we got involved with some bad people. Gamblers. Loan sharks. If we don't pay them back. How much do you really owe? 50,000, Denise said. But they want 150 with interest. I stared at them. So instead of asking me for $150,000, which I probably would have given you, you decided to take out life insurance policies and murder me for 3 times that amount? The words hung in the air like smoke. Michael started crying. Ma, I never wanted this. I swear. It was her idea. Shut up, Michael. Denise's voice was sharp as a blade. No, he said, tears streaming down his face. I can't do this anymore. Ma, she said it would be easy. That you were old and no one would question it if you died peacefully. But I can't watch you die. I can't. As the police sirens grew louder outside, I watched my son's face crumble, but Denise just smiled and said, You have no idea what you've started. How do you rebuild trust after ultimate betrayal? Is there a point of no return in relationships? Because I was about to find out. When your own family becomes your enemy, every instinct you've developed over 70 years of living suddenly kicks in at once. After Michael's breakdown and Denise's cold confession, I knew I had maybe minutes before she tried something desperate. Cornered animals bite, and Denise was definitely cornered. Michael, go to your room, she ordered, like he was a child instead of a grown man. Amazingly, he obeyed. My 35-year-old son shuffled out of his own office like a scolded boy, leaving me alone with a woman who just admitted to planning my murder. The house felt different now that the truth was out. Smaller. More dangerous. Like the walls themselves were closing in. So, Denise said, shutting the office door behind Michael. Now what? She wasn't pretending anymore. No sweet smiles. No fake concern. Just cold calculation as she figured out her next move. Now I call the police, I said, reaching for my purse. I don't think so. She moved faster than I expected, grabbing my purse and tossing it across the room. My cell phone clattered against the wall. You're not calling anyone until we figure this out. Figure what out? You plan to murder me for insurance money. What's to figure out? How to clean up this mess. Michael wasn't supposed to break down like that. He was supposed to keep his mouth shut. She paced the small office like a caged tiger. I stayed in my chair, trying to look smaller and more helpless than I felt. Let her underestimate me. Wouldn't be the first time someone made that mistake. Here's what's going to happen, she continued. You're going to transfer that money to our account today. All of it. Then you're going to go home to Virginia and forget this conversation ever happened. And if I don't? She stopped pacing and looked at me directly. Then you'll have an accident. Today. And it won't be as peaceful as the coffee would have been. The threat hung between us like a loaded gun. But here's something Denise didn't know about me: I'd been threatened before. Not by family, but by men who thought a single mother with a baby was easy prey. I'd survived 43 years of raising a son alone, working in rough neighborhoods, dealing with drunk patients in emergency rooms, and handling creditors when money was tight. I wasn't as helpless as I looked. You know what, honey? I said, standing up slowly. I think you're right. Let me get my checkbook. She blinked, surprised by my sudden cooperation. Good. You're being smart. I walked toward my purse, moving like an old woman who'd given up. Slow. Defeated. Harmless. Michael has his father's weakness, I said conversationally. Always did. Soft heart, soft spine. But you? You're something else entirely. I'm a survivor. Always have been. I can see that. I bent down to pick up my purse, and that's when I saw it, Michael's letter opener on the desk. Heavy brass, about 6 inches long. Sharp enough to do damage if necessary. You know, I continued, straightening up with my purse, I was thinking about what you said. About dangerous people looking for you. What about it? Well, if these people are as dangerous as you claim, they're probably watching you. Might even know I'm here. Something flickered in her eyes. Fear. What's your point? My point is, if something happens to me, if I have an accident, they're going to wonder where you got the money to pay them back. Old ladies don't just disappear without people asking questions. Nobody will ask questions. You're a lonely widow with no family except Michael. Actually, that's not true. I opened my purse and pulled out my cell phone, which had survived its trip across the room. I called my neighbor yesterday. Told her exactly where I was, who I was with, and why I was here. Mrs. Patterson is 83, but she's got a memory like a steel trap and the persistence of a bloodhound. Denise's confidence wavered slightly. I also called my bank. Left a message with my financial advisor about a large transfer I was considering. Mentioned I was nervous about it, but family was pressuring me. That was a lie, but she didn't know that. And this morning, before breakfast, I sent an email to my lawyer. Asked him to update my will. Funny thing about lawyers, they keep detailed records of everything. Another lie, but I was on a roll. So if something happens to me today, there's going to be a paper trail leading straight to this house. And you? Her face had gone pale under her perfect makeup. You're bluffing. Maybe. Want to find out? We stared at each other across that office, two women who'd underestimated each other from the beginning. She'd thought I was a helpless old lady. I'd thought she was just a gold digger. We were both wrong. The silence stretched between us until we heard footsteps in the hallway. Heavy footsteps. Not Michael's. Denise's eyes went wide. Are you expecting someone? No. Are you? The footsteps stopped outside the office door. Then came a knock. Sharp. Impatient. Mrs. Johnson? This is Detective Martinez with Atlanta PD. We'd like to speak with you. Police. Real police. But how did they know to come here? Denise looked at me with pure hatred. What did you do? Nothing. Yet. Another knock. Mrs. Johnson? We know you're in there. Go ahead, I said quietly. Answer it. Tell them everything's fine. Tell them your mother-in-law is just here for a nice visit. But Denise was already moving toward the window, looking for another way out. There's nowhere to run, I said. This is a subdivision. Neighbors in every direction. Police cars out front. Your best bet is to cooperate. Mrs. Johnson? The detective's voice was getting impatient. Michael appeared in the doorway, looking like he'd aged 10 years in 10 minutes. Ma, there are police cars outside. What do I do? Before I could answer, Denise pushed past him and headed for the back door. Let her go, I told Michael. She won't get far. As the police sirens grew louder and Michael's face crumbled, I realized something. I wasn't just a victim anymore. I was a survivor. And survivors fight back. What would you sacrifice to save your own life? How far would you go to survive family betrayal? Because I was about to find out exactly what I was made of. Just as I thought I'd found my way out, I heard Denise's voice from the kitchen, talking to someone on the phone. Someone she called Tony. And I realized this nightmare was just getting started. Sometimes salvation comes from the most unlikely sources. In my case, it came from an 80-year-old woman with a hearing aid and a suspicious mind. The police officer at my door wasn't Detective Martinez. He was Officer Roberts, barely old enough to shave, looking nervous as a long-tailed cat in a room full of rocking chairs. "Ma'am, we got a call from a Mrs. Patterson in Richmond, Virginia. She said she was concerned about your welfare." Mrs. Patterson. My neighbor who I'd waved to exactly twice in the 3 years I'd lived on Maple Street. The woman I'd never actually had a full conversation with. "She said you called her yesterday, very upset about some family financial matter. Asked her to call the police if she didn't hear from you by noon today." I stared at the young officer. I'd never called Mrs. Patterson. Never even had her phone number. "She also said to tell you that your cat is fine and she's been feeding him like you asked." I didn't ask her to feed my cat either. But apparently, Mrs. Patterson had decided to become my guardian angel whether I'd asked for it or not. "May we come in, ma'am? Just want to make sure everything's all right." Behind Officer Roberts stood an older man in a suit who looked like he'd been doing this job since before I was born. "I'm Detective Williams," he said. "We just want to ask a few questions." Denise had disappeared out the back door, but I could hear Michael in the kitchen, probably having another breakdown. Poor boy never did handle stress well. "Of course. Please come in." I led them to the living room, where the coffee-stained papers from last night's accident were still spread across the table. "Looks like you had a little spill," Detective Williams observed. Clumsy me. My daughter-in-law made coffee, and I knocked it over. "Where is your daughter-in-law now?" "She stepped out. Said she had errands to run." The detective's eyes missed nothing. He took in the expensive furniture, the perfect decorating, the family photos strategically placed around the room. "Mrs. Johnson, can you tell us why Mrs. Patterson was concerned about your welfare?" Here was my moment. I could tell them everything: the midnight conversation, the insurance policies, the poisoned coffee plan. Or I could protect my son and handle this family matter privately. Looking at those officers, I made a decision that would change everything. "Detective Williams, I need to show you something." I led them to Michael's office, where the insurance papers were still scattered across his desk. "These are life insurance policies on me. 3 of them. Total value, $750,000. All taken out within the last 2 months by my son and his wife." Both officers went very still. "Ma'am, did you consent to these policies?" "I had no idea they existed until an hour ago." Detective Williams picked up one of the policies, reading carefully. "Mrs. Johnson, taking out life insurance on someone without their knowledge is fraud. But what concerns me more is the timing." "What do you mean?" 3 policies, all recent, all with substantial payouts. Usually when we see this pattern." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Well, it often indicates someone's planning for a death to occur sooner rather than later." Officer Roberts was examining the property documents. "These Florida real estate investments, they look suspicious too. Like someone was trying to create fake debt." That's when Michael appeared in the doorway, looking like he might collapse. "Ma, I can explain." "Son," Detective Williams said gently, "I think you'd better sit down." For the next hour, the whole story came out. Not from me, from Michael. Once he started talking, it was like opening a floodgate. The gambling debts that were real but smaller than they'd claimed. Denise's idea to fake bigger losses. The insurance policies she'd convinced him to take out. The plan to poison me and make it look natural. She said it would be easy, he kept repeating. Said old people died in their sleep all the time. Said no one would question it. But you questioned it, I said quietly. I couldn't sleep. Couldn't eat. Every time I looked at you, I saw Dad. Remembered how you held his hand when he was dying in that hospital. How you never left his side. Tears were streaming down his face. I couldn't watch someone kill you, Ma. Even if it meant losing everything else. Detective Williams was taking notes. Where did your wife go when she left here? I don't know. She just ran. Does she have anywhere she might go? Friends? Family? Michael shook his head. She always said she didn't have family. No close friends either. She kept to herself mostly. What about these people you owe money to? The dangerous ones? Michael's face went gray. Tony Marcelli. He runs a poker game downtown. We owe him about 50 grand. 50,000? But you told me it was 150 with interest. That was Denise's number. She said we needed extra to disappear after you were gone. So even the debt was exaggerated. Everything was lies built on top of more lies. Officer Roberts was on his radio, calling in Denise's description and car information. Detective Williams was still asking questions about the insurance policies and property documents. But I was thinking about something else. Something that had been nagging at me since yesterday. Detective Williams, how did Mrs. Patterson know to call you? I mean, really know? I've barely spoken to that woman in 3 years. He smiled slightly. Mrs. Patterson has been calling us about suspicious activity in her neighborhood for the past 10 years. Usually it's nothing, teenagers being too loud, strange cars parked on the street. But she's got good instincts. And she's been watching your house since you left. Watching my house? Said she saw someone trying to break in yesterday night. Male, about 35, driving a car with Georgia plates. When she saw him using a key to get in, she got suspicious. My blood ran cold. Georgia plates? That's right. She wrote down the license number. Matches your son's registration. Michael looked confused. Ma, I haven't been to your house. I don't even have a key. But I knew who did have a key. I'd given him one 5 years ago, when he was still married to his first wife. Before Denise. Detective, I think Denise went to my house. Why would she do that? Because that's where my real savings are hidden. And if she's desperate enough to run, she's desperate enough to steal everything else I have. Have you ever found unexpected allies in your darkest moment? How did strangers become your salvation? Because Mrs. Patterson, a woman I barely knew, was about to save not just my life, but everything I'd worked for. We had to get to Virginia. Fast. The drive from Atlanta to Richmond felt like the longest 4 hours of my life, even with police sirens clearing the way. Detective Williams had called ahead to the Virginia State Police, and they met us at my house with enough squad cars to make the whole neighborhood think I was running a drug operation. Mrs. Patterson stood on her front porch in her bathrobe and curlers, looking satisfied as a cat who'd caught the biggest mouse in the county. That woman's been in and out of your house 3 times since yesterday, she called to me as I got out of the police car. I knew something wasn't right. Nobody visits that much without calling first. 3 times. Denise had been ransacking my house for 2 days while I was in Atlanta drinking poisoned coffee and dodging murder attempts. The front door was locked, but when Detective Williams used the key I'd given him, we could see the damage immediately. Drawers pulled out. Cushions overturned. Books scattered across the floor. She'd been looking for something specific. Ma, Michael said quietly, where did you keep your important papers? I walked through my destroyed living room toward the back bedroom. The mattress was off the bed, the closet emptied, my jewelry box overturned on the dresser. But she'd missed the most important hiding place. Detective, can you help me move this dresser? Together, we slid the heavy wooden dresser away from the wall, revealing a small safe built into the floor. My late husband had installed it 30 years ago, back when he was worried about break-ins in our old neighborhood. She never found this, I said, entering the combination. Inside the safe were my real treasures. The deed to my house. My husband's life insurance policy. Stock certificates I'd been saving for decades. And most importantly, bank statements showing my actual net worth. Mrs. Johnson, Detective Williams said, looking at the bank statements, these numbers are different from what you told your son. I lied to him. Old habit from being a single mother, never let anyone know exactly how much you have saved. The truth was, I had closer to $400,000 in various accounts, plus the house which was worth another $180,000. I'd been poor for so long that hiding money had become second nature. So when your son asked for $200,000, I could have given it to him without touching my retirement. But something felt wrong about the whole situation. Michael was standing in the doorway, staring at the papers scattered around my bedroom. Ma, I had no idea you had this much saved. That was the point, baby. A woman alone has to be careful about who knows her business. Officer Roberts appeared in the bedroom doorway. Detective? We found something in the kitchen. In the kitchen, they discovered Denise's biggest mistake. She'd left her purse behind in her rush to search the house. Inside were printouts of my bank statements, the real ones, not the fake numbers I'd given Michael. How did she get these? Detective Williams asked. I studied the papers. They were recent, dated just last week. These came from my online banking. Someone would need my password to access this. Michael looked confused. Ma, how would Denise know your banking password? She wouldn't. Unless. I stopped, thinking. Michael, remember when I visited you at Christmas? I used your computer to check my bank balance. Yeah, I remember. Denise helped you log in because you weren't used to their system. Of course. Denise had watched me enter my password, memorized it, and then spent months planning my murder while she studied my financial information. Detective, I said, this proves premeditation. She's been planning this for months. It also tells us she's desperate. She knows exactly how much money is at stake now. Officer Roberts was still going through Denise's purse. There's something else. Credit cards maxed out. Overdue notices. Looks like her financial situation is worse than she let on. What do you mean? These aren't gambling debts from her husband's poker games. This is credit card debt, medical bills, student loans. She owes over $200,000 to various creditors. Has for years, by the look of these dates. Michael sat down hard in one of my kitchen chairs. She told me her credit was perfect. Said she'd never had debt problems. Son, your wife has been lying about everything since the day you met her. Detective Williams was photographing everything, the bank statements, the credit card bills, the evidence of Denise's systematic search through my house. Mrs. Johnson, we need to consider the possibility that she's not done yet. If she's this desperate, and she knows about your real assets, you think she'll try again? People who plan murder for money don't usually give up after one failed attempt. That's when Officer Roberts' radio crackled to life. Unit 47, we have eyes on the suspect vehicle. Highway 64 eastbound, approaching the Virginia Beach exit. Virginia Beach. Where I used to work at the hospital. Where I still had friends. She's going to the hospital, I said suddenly. Why would she go there? Because she knows I worked there for 15 years. She's probably planning to tell them I'm having some kind of medical emergency. Get access to my medical records, maybe even my emergency contact information. Michael looked sick. Ma, she asked me all about your work history last month. Said she wanted to understand your life better. More lies. She'd been gathering information, studying my habits, learning everything she could to make my murder look natural. Detective, we need to get to that hospital. If she's planning to fake some kind of medical emergency. Already on it. He was back on his radio, coordinating with Virginia Beach police. But I was thinking about something else. Something that had been bothering me since I'd first met Denise. Michael, where exactly did you meet Denise? At that conference in Birmingham, remember? I told you the story at the wedding. But earlier today, she said it was at a business meeting. For your company. He frowned. No, it was definitely a conference. Insurance industry conference. She was there representing some consulting firm. What was the name of the firm? I don't remember. Something with the solutions in the name, I think. Officer Roberts looked up from Denise's purse. There's no business cards in here for any consulting firm. But there are 3 different driver's licenses. 3 driver's licenses. All with Denise's picture, but different names. Denise Martin from Detroit. Denise Williams from Chicago. Denise Thompson from Miami. My blood ran cold. Michael, which name did she use when you married her? Martin. Denise Martin. And her social security number? For the marriage license? Michael's face went white as he realized what I was getting at. Detective, I said quietly, I don't think Denise is her real name. And I don't think Detroit is where she's really from. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting my son married a professional con artist. Someone who makes a living marrying men and then stealing from their families. The thrill of investigation awakening dormant passions, feeling alive and powerful in ways I'd forgotten for decades. This wasn't just about survival anymore, it was about justice. We need to run these IDs through the system, Detective Williams said. See if any of these names have criminal records. While he made calls, I walked through my destroyed house, trying to see it through Denise's eyes. What had she been looking for besides money? What else did she think I had that was worth killing for? In my bedroom, I noticed something I'd missed before. My photo albums were scattered across the floor, but they'd been looked through carefully. Pictures of Michael as a child. Pictures of my late husband. Pictures of our old house in North Carolina. She was looking for ammunition, I said out loud. What? Michael asked. Information she could use against us. Pictures, documents, anything that might help her manipulate the situation if her original plan failed. I knelt down, gathering up the scattered photos. And that's when I found it, a business card that had been tucked inside one of the albums. A card I'd never seen before. Detective Williams? You need to see this. The card was elegant, expensive-looking. Sunset Memorial Services, specializing in dignified services for seniors. A funeral home. She'd already contacted a funeral home. When was this dated? Detective Williams asked, examining the card. I flipped it over. In Denise's handwriting, Ruth Johnson, heart failure, peaceful passing, Wednesday evening. Wednesday evening. Tonight. She'd already planned my funeral before she'd planned my murder. How do you find courage when everything familiar becomes dangerous? What awakens your fighting spirit? Because holding that funeral card in my hands, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Pure, righteous anger. This woman hadn't just planned to kill me. She'd planned to profit from my death, steal my life's work, destroy my son's soul, and then attend my funeral with fake tears and a black dress. Detective, I said, standing up with more strength than I'd felt in months, we're going to catch this woman. And we're going to make sure she pays for every lie she's told and every life she's tried to destroy. The radio crackled again. Units in pursuit. Suspect vehicle has crashed at the Virginia Beach city limits. Driver fled on foot into the residential area. She was running. But she was running in my territory now. And I knew every street, every shortcut, every hiding place in Virginia Beach. The hunt was on. There's something about your hometown that gets into your blood and stays there forever. I'd worked at Virginia Beach General Hospital for 15 years, lived in the surrounding neighborhoods for another 10. I knew every street corner, every 24-hour diner, every place a desperate woman might try to hide. Denise had made her first real mistake by running to my territory. "Detective Williams," I said as we sped toward the crash site, "she's not running randomly. She's got a plan." "What makes you say that?" "Because everything else she's done has been calculated. The fake identities, the insurance policies, the timing of everything. She chose Virginia Beach for a reason." Michael was sitting in the back seat, looking like he'd aged 20 years in the past day. "Ma, what if she gets away?" "She won't." "How can you be sure?" "Because I knew something about desperate people that Denise hadn't counted on. When you back someone into a corner, they don't just run, they go to ground somewhere familiar. Somewhere that feels safe." "Michael, in all the months you knew Denise, did she ever mention Virginia Beach specifically? Any connection to the area?" He thought for a moment. "She asked a lot of questions about your time at the hospital. Wanted to know about your friends there, your old neighborhoods." "What kind of questions?" "About your routine. What time you used to get off work, where you went for coffee, stuff like that. She'd been mapping out my life. Learning my habits, my safe places, my regular haunts. But now she was trapped in territory I knew better than she did. The crash site was exactly what I expected. Her rental car had slid off Highway 64 into a drainage ditch, front end crumpled against a concrete culvert. The airbags had deployed, and there was blood on the driver's seat. "She's hurt," Officer Roberts observed. "Not badly enough," I muttered. Detective Williams shot me a look. "Mrs. Johnson, I understand you're angry, but we need to bring her in safely." "Of course. But I want to help find her." "Ma'am, you're a civilian. This is police business now." "Detective, with all due respect, I know this area better than any of your officers. And I know how Denise thinks." He considered this. "What do you have in mind?" I pulled out my cell phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found the number I was looking for. "I'm calling someone who can help." "Ruth? Is that you?" Gladys Hernandez had been my supervisor at the hospital, and we'd stayed friends even after I retired. "Gladys, I need a favor." "A big one." "What's wrong? You sound upset." "I'm fine, but I need you to check something for me." "Has anyone called the hospital today asking about me? Maybe claiming to be family, or saying there was an emergency?" A pause. "Actually, yes. About an hour ago. A woman called saying she was your daughter-in-law and you'd had a heart attack at your son's house in Georgia. She wanted to know about your medical history, your medications, your emergency contacts." My heart hammered. "What did you tell her?" "Nothing. We don't give out patient information over the phone, even to family." But she was very persistent. Kept asking if you'd ever been treated for heart problems. "Did she say where she was calling from?" "She said she was at Atlanta General, but when I tried to transfer her to speak with your doctor there, she hung up." "Atlanta General. But she was here in Virginia Beach now." "Gladys, if she calls back, don't give her any information. And call the police immediately." "Ruth, what's going on?" "It's a long story, but that woman is not my daughter-in-law, and I'm not having a heart attack. She's a con artist trying to steal my identity." After I hung up, Detective Williams looked at me with new respect. "She was planning to use your medical history to make your death look natural." "Exactly. And she probably has backup plans we don't even know about yet." That's when I noticed something the other officers had missed. Fresh footprints in the mud near the crashed car, leading away from the road toward the residential area. But they weren't heading randomly into the neighborhood. They were heading toward Oceanfront Memorial Gardens, the cemetery where my husband was buried. "Detective, she's going to the cemetery." "Why would she go there?" "Because she knows I visit there every month. She's been studying my habits, remember? She probably thinks it's a place I might go if I was upset or scared." "You think she's waiting for you there?" "I think she's planning one last attempt. If she can't kill me with poison or fake medical emergencies, maybe she'll try a more direct approach." Michael grabbed my arm. Ma, you can't go there. It's too dangerous. Honey, I've been in danger since the moment I answered that phone call 3 days ago. At least now I know what I'm dealing with. Detective Williams was already coordinating with his team, setting up a perimeter around the cemetery. But I had a different idea. Detective, what if we turned the tables on her? What do you mean? She's expecting me to be scared, confused, running around like a helpless old woman. What if instead, I showed up where she's waiting, but with backup she can't see? Mrs. Johnson, we can't use you as bait. You're not using me as bait. I'm volunteering to finish what she started. The power of taking control, creating a rush of dominance, feeling sexual energy in unexpected victory. This wasn't just about surviving anymore. This was about winning. She tried to destroy my family, steal my life's work, and turn my own son into an accomplice to murder. Now it's my turn. 20 minutes later, I walked through the front gates of Oceanfront Memorial Gardens carrying a small bouquet of flowers, just like I did every month when I visited my husband's grave. But this time, Detective Williams and 3 other officers were hidden among the tombstones, watching my every move. And this time, I wasn't the victim. I was the hunter. Have you ever turned the tables on someone who underestimated you? What did that victory feel like? Because I was about to find out. As I walked toward my husband's headstone, I saw her. Denise. Crouched behind a large memorial about 50 yards away, blood on her forehead from the car crash, watching me approach. She thought she was setting a trap. Instead, she'd walked right into mine. 6 months later, I sat in a Norfolk courtroom watching my son's wife, whose real name turned out to be Diana Martinez from Phoenix, try to convince a jury that she was the victim in this whole mess. The woman was good, I'll give her that. Sitting at the defendant's table in a conservative blue dress, hair pulled back modestly, makeup just heavy enough to hide the scar from her car crash but light enough to look innocent. She'd even managed to cry on command when her lawyer talked about her difficult childhood and desperate circumstances. If I hadn't lived through her murder plot personally, I might have felt sorry for her. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, her defense attorney was saying, my client is guilty of nothing more than loving her husband and wanting to help his family during a financial crisis. Financial crisis. That's what they were calling attempted murder now. The prosecutor, a sharp young woman named Jennifer Walsh, had spent 3 days laying out the evidence. The fake identities. The insurance policies taken out without my knowledge. The midnight conversation Officer Roberts had recorded when they'd wired Michael's phone. The funeral arrangements Diana had made before I was even supposed to be dead. But Diana's lawyer was spinning a different story. According to him, she was just a desperate wife who'd gotten involved with the wrong people and made some bad decisions under pressure. The evidence will show, he continued, that Diana Martinez was herself a victim of threatening loan sharks, of an abusive relationship, of circumstances beyond her control. Abusive relationship. I glanced over at Michael, sitting in the witness section. In 6 months, he'd lost 40 pounds and gained a 1,000-yard stare. Whether Diana had been abusive or just manipulative, she'd definitely destroyed the boy I'd raised. Furthermore, the lawyer went on, there is no concrete evidence that my client ever intended to harm Mrs. Johnson. Conversations taken out of context, assumptions based on suspicious timing, but no actual proof of intent to commit murder. No proof. Except for the poison they'd found in Diana's rental car. Except for the detailed research on my medical history. Except for the funeral arrangements made in advance. But juries can be funny things. Sometimes they focus on what wasn't proven instead of what was. Your Honor, Prosecutor Walsh said, standing for her closing argument, this case is about predatory behavior targeting our most vulnerable citizens. The defendant systematically researched the victim's life, forged a relationship with her son, took out fraudulent insurance policies, and planned what she believed would be the perfect murder. She walked over to the evidence table and picked up the business card for Sunset Memorial Services. This card, found in the defendant's handwriting, shows the date and cause of death she planned for Mrs. Johnson. Heart failure, Wednesday evening. The same Wednesday evening she planned to serve poisoned coffee. The defendant studied Mrs. Johnson's work history, her financial situation, her daily routines, and her relationship with her son. She used that information to craft a murder plot disguised as family assistance. I watched the jury faces as Prosecutor Walsh spoke. Some looked convinced. Others looked skeptical. 12 strangers who would decide whether Diana spent the next 20 years in prison or walked free to find her next victim. But most importantly, Walsh continued, this case is about what happens when we allow criminals to prey on the love between parents and children. Mrs. Johnson worked 40 years to save the money the defendant wanted to steal. She raised her son alone, sacrificed everything for his future, trusted him completely. The defendant weaponized that trust. She turned a mother's love into a murder weapon. Diana dabbed at her eyes with a tissue, playing the part of the wronged woman perfectly. Mrs. Johnson, the prosecutor said, turning to look at me in the gallery, survived because she trusted her instincts over her emotions. Because 40 years of single motherhood had taught her to recognize danger, even when it wore a familiar face. The intimacy of truth-telling in public, stripping away pretenses and feeling naked honesty as power. Every detail of that horrible week was being examined under courthouse lights, but I felt stronger, not weaker, for having survived it. When they called me to testify, I walked to that witness stand with my head high. Mrs. Johnson, Prosecutor Walsh asked, why didn't you drink the coffee your daughter-in-law prepared for you? Because my gut told me not to. 70 years of living teaches you to pay attention when something feels wrong. Even though it meant suspecting your own family? Especially because it meant suspecting my own family. The people closest to you have the most power to hurt you. Diana's lawyer cross-examined me for 2 hours, trying to make me look confused, vindictive, or mistaken. Asked about my age, my memory, whether I might have misunderstood conversations. Mrs. Johnson, isn't it possible you misheard what you thought was a murder plot? Elderly people sometimes have difficulty with. Son, I interrupted, I may be 71, but I'm not deaf, blind, or stupid. I know the difference between asking for help and planning murder. The courtroom chuckled, and the lawyer backed off. But the hardest part came when Michael testified. My own son, forced to admit in open court that he'd been willing to let his wife kill his mother for insurance money. Mr. Johnson, Diana's lawyer asked, did you ever explicitly agree to harm your mother? No, Michael said quietly. I couldn't go through with it. So you never actually intended for any harm to come to Mrs. Johnson? I don't know what I intended. I was scared. Confused. Diana said we'd lose everything if we didn't get the money. And you believed your mother's life was in danger from these alleged loan sharks? Diana told me they were dangerous people. Said they'd hurt both of us if we didn't pay. The lawyer made it sound like Michael was just a concerned son trying to protect everyone. But I could see the jury wasn't buying it completely. After 3 days of testimony, the jury deliberated for 6 hours. When they came back, the foreman stood up with a piece of paper that would determine whether justice was served or evil walked free. On the charge of conspiracy to commit murder in the first degree, we find the defendant. The courtroom held its breath. Guilty. Diana's face crumpled. Not the pretty tears she'd been faking all week, but real emotion finally breaking through. On the charge of insurance fraud. Guilty. On the charge of identity theft. Guilty. Guilty on all counts. 25 years to life, with possibility of parole after 15. How do you face your accusers when they're family? What gives you strength to speak truth publicly? Because watching Diana Martinez, or whatever her real name was, get handcuffed and led away, I felt something I hadn't expected. Not satisfaction. Not revenge. Relief. The jury deliberated for 3 hours, but when they returned, the verdict wasn't what any of us expected. Because Michael was charged too. The day after Diana's sentencing, Michael and I sat in my rebuilt living room and had the hardest conversation of our lives. Ma, I need to tell you something. Something I should have told you months ago. He looked terrible. Thin, gray, hollow-eyed. Like a man carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders. I'm listening, baby. Diana wasn't my first wife. I blinked. What do you mean? I mean, I was married before. To a woman named Lisa. We divorced 2 years ago. 2 years ago. He'd been divorced for 2 years and never told me. Why didn't you tell me about Lisa? Because of why we divorced. He ran his hands through his hair. Ma, I had a gambling problem. A bad one. I lost our house, our savings, everything. Lisa left me, and I don't blame her. Gambling problem. So that part hadn't been a lie. When I met Diana, I was broke. Living in a studio apartment, working commission only at an insurance company that was about to fire me. How did you meet her, really? At a Gamblers Anonymous meeting. The truth hit me like a slap. She was there for gambling addiction too? No. She was there hunting for marks. Men with family money, men with something to lose. She told me later that GA meetings were perfect hunting grounds, guys with addiction problems, family shame, desperate enough to do anything. My stomach turned. Diana hadn't fallen in love with my son. She'd selected him like a predator selects prey. She researched our family for weeks before she even talked to me. Knew about you, about your savings, about the house. She knew I was weak and desperate and would do anything to keep from disappointing you again. Again? Michael's voice dropped to a whisper. Ma, I stole from you before. 3 years ago, when Lisa and I were about to lose the house. I took your credit card information and charged $15,000 to gambling sites. The room spun around me. What? I'd been paying it back in small amounts, but you never noticed because I was careful about the dates. I told myself I'd pay it all back before you found out. $15,000. Stolen from his own mother while I was working extra shifts to pad my retirement account. And Diana knew about this? She figured it out somehow. Said it proved I was capable of taking what I needed from family when necessary. I sat there processing this information. My son hadn't just been willing to let Diana murder me. He'd already been stealing from me for years. Michael, why are you telling me this now? Because I can't live with the guilt anymore. And because Diana's lawyer contacted me yesterday. What did he want? He wants me to testify that you were abusive when I was growing up. That you withheld money and love unless I did what you wanted. That I was so desperate to please you, I'd agree to anything. My blood ran cold. And? He's offering to get my charges reduced if I cooperate. Maybe even dropped completely. So this was the choice. Truth or freedom. Justice or family loyalty. What are you going to do? Michael looked at me with eyes that reminded me of the little boy who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms. Ma, I love you. I know I haven't acted like it lately, but I do. And I can't lie about you in court, even if it means going to prison. Baby, what are you saying? I'm saying I'm going to tell the truth. All of it. About Diana, about the gambling, about the money I stole, about my part in the murder plot. Whatever happens to me, happens. For the first time in months, I felt proud of my son. And I'm going to get help. Real help. Not just for the gambling, but for everything. The lying, the weakness, the way I let her turn me against you. I reached over and took his hand. It was the first time I'd touched him with love instead of fear since this whole nightmare started. Michael, we'll get through this together. How can you forgive me? After everything I did? Because you're my son. And because you chose truth over convenience. That's the boy I raised. But even as I said the words, I knew our relationship would never be the same. Trust, once broken, doesn't heal clean. It heals with scars. There's something else, he said quietly. What? Diana's not the only one. The FBI contacted me yesterday. They think she's done this before. Other men in other cities. Other families destroyed. The intimacy of complete honesty creating unexpected emotional connection, feeling vulnerable yet powerful. We were finally talking like adults, like equals, like two people who'd survived the same disaster. How many others? They think at least 4. Maybe more. Always the same pattern: target men with family money, marry quickly, take out insurance policies, then stage accidents. 4 other families destroyed. 4 other mothers who might not have been as lucky as me. Did any of them? 2 women died. Heart attacks. Both ruled natural causes until the FBI started looking into the pattern. 2 mothers were dead because of Diana. 2 families destroyed. And if I hadn't trusted my instincts that night, if I'd drunk that coffee, I would have been number 3. Ma, I know I don't deserve it, but I need to ask you something. What? Will you help me testify against her? Will you help me make sure she never does this to another family? When Michael finally told me the whole truth about why he needed the money, I had to choose between a mother's love and a survivor's justice. But sitting there looking at my broken, honest son, I realized I didn't have to choose. I could have both. The federal courthouse in Richmond was nothing like the state court where Diana had been convicted. This was bigger, more formal, more final. This was where we'd settle the score once and for all. Diana. I still couldn't think of her as Martinez or Williams or whatever her real name was, looked different in federal custody. Thinner. Harder. The polish was gone, replaced by the sharp edges of a woman with nothing left to lose. Mrs. Johnson, federal prosecutor David Chen said as we sat in his office before the final sentencing hearing, your testimony has been crucial in establishing the pattern of behavior that helped us connect the other cases. 4 other cases. 4 other families. 2 other mothers who died because they'd trusted the wrong person with their lives. I just want to make sure she can't do this again. With your testimony and the evidence from the other victims' families, she's looking at life without parole. Life without parole. It should have felt like victory, but mostly it just felt necessary. Like taking out the trash or fixing a broken fence, something that had to be done to keep the world safe. Michael sat beside me, wearing his only good suit and the hollow expression he'd carried for 6 months. Today he'd testify too, but as a victim instead of an accomplice. The federal prosecutor had granted him immunity in exchange for his cooperation. How are you holding up, son? Scared, he admitted. Ashamed. Grateful to be alive. Good. All of those are appropriate. The courtroom was packed. Families of Diana's other victims had flown in from 3 different states. I wasn't the only mother who'd almost lost everything to this woman's greed. When they called my name to testify, I walked to that witness stand feeling every one of my 71 years, but also feeling stronger than I had in decades. Mrs. Johnson, Prosecutor Chen began, please tell the court how you first became aware that the defendant was planning to harm you. I told the story again. The midnight conversation. The insurance policies. The poisoned coffee. But this time, it felt different. Not like reliving trauma, but like sharing a lesson. What made you suspicious of the defendant from the beginning? Little things. Stories that didn't match up. Information she shouldn't have had. A woman my age learns to pay attention to details. And when you realized she intended to kill you, what did you do? I decided to fight back. The defense attorney, a different one this time, since her original lawyer had dropped her case, tried to paint me as a vindictive old woman who'd misunderstood innocent conversations. Mrs. Johnson, isn't it true that you'd already decided not to lend your son money before you ever came to Atlanta? I hadn't decided anything. I came to help my child, like any mother would. But you were suspicious from the phone call itself, weren't you? Yes. Because a mother knows when her child is lying. So you went to Atlanta already looking for trouble. I went to Atlanta hoping I was wrong. Praying I was wrong. But preparing to protect myself if I wasn't. The power of walking away, creating ultimate sexual energy, choosing self over others as deeply intimate act. Standing in that courtroom, telling my truth to strangers, I felt more alive than I had in years. Mrs. Johnson, the defense attorney continued, how do we know you didn't plan this entire scenario to frame my client? An elderly woman with substantial assets, angry about her son's marriage to a younger woman? Before I could answer, Michael stood up in the gallery. Your Honor, may I speak? Mr. Johnson, you're not testifying right now. Please. I need to say this. The judge looked annoyed but nodded. My mother didn't frame anyone. My wife, ex-wife, whatever Diana is, she planned to murder my mother for money. I was there. I heard it. I was going to let it happen because I was weak and scared and stupid. His voice broke, but he kept talking. My mother raised me alone after my father died. She worked 2 jobs, 3 jobs sometimes, to give me everything I needed. She taught me right from wrong, and I threw it all away for a woman who saw us as nothing but dollar signs. Mr. Johnson, the defense attorney tried to interrupt. I'm not finished. Michael's voice was stronger now. My mother could have died that night. Would have died if she hadn't been smarter and braver than both Diana and me combined. And now this lawyer wants to blame her for surviving? The judge banged his gavel. Mr. Johnson, please sit down. But Michael wasn't done. Diana Martinez, or whatever her real name is a predator. She finds weak men with strong mothers and turns love into a weapon. She almost succeeded with us. Don't let her succeed in blaming the victim for being too smart to die. The courtroom was dead silent as Michael sat back down. Diana was staring at him with pure hatred, probably realizing her last hope of manipulation had just collapsed. When the judge asked Diana if she wanted to make a statement before sentencing, she stood up slowly. Your Honor, I'm not going to apologize for trying to survive in a world that gives women like me very few options. No remorse. No regret. Just defiance. I'm not going to pretend I'm sorry for being smarter than the people who underestimated me. The judge's face was stone. Ms. Martinez, you're not being sentenced for being smart. You're being sentenced for using that intelligence to prey on innocent people. Innocent? Diana laughed. That woman has more money than some small countries. Her son was weak enough to gamble away everything he touched. I just saw an opportunity and took it. An opportunity to commit murder. An opportunity to solve everyone's problems with one simple solution. The arrogance was breathtaking. Even facing life in prison, she couldn't admit she'd done anything wrong. MS. Martinez, you are hereby sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The gavel came down like thunder. As they led Diana away in handcuffs, she turned to look at me one last time. You think you won, she said. But you lost your son anyway. I looked over at Michael, sitting in the gallery with tears streaming down his face. No, I said. I saved him. As I walked away from that courtroom, I knew I'd never see my son the same way again, but I'd finally found myself. What does it take to completely rebuild your life after devastating betrayal? How do you reclaim your power when the people you trusted most try to destroy you? I was about to find out. 1 year after the trial, I was sitting in my new kitchen in Virginia Beach, drinking real coffee that no one had poisoned, when Michael knocked on my door. I'd moved 6 months earlier. Couldn't stay in the Richmond house where Diana had ransacked my belongings and Michael had stolen my credit card information. Too many ghosts. Too many memories of feeling unsafe in my own home. The new house was smaller but brighter. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a kitchen that looked out over a garden I was still learning to tend. Most importantly, it was mine. Completely, absolutely mine. No one else had keys. No one else knew my routines. No one else could make me feel like a stranger in my own life. Ma? Michael's voice was tentative through the door. Can I come in? I looked at him through the peephole before answering. He looked better, healthier, less gray around the edges. 6 months of intensive therapy and Gamblers Anonymous meetings had helped, but he still carried himself like a man who'd lost something precious and wasn't sure he deserved to find it again. Doors open. He sat at my new kitchen table carefully, like he wasn't sure he was welcome. Nice place. I like what you've done with it. Thank you. Coffee? Please. I poured 2 cups, noting how his hands still shook slightly when I handed him one. Some damages take longer to heal than others. How are the meetings going? Good. Hard, but good. I'm 97 days clean from gambling. And the therapy? Dr. Rodriguez says I'm making progress. Learning to recognize manipulation, set boundaries, deal with shame without running away. We sat in comfortable silence for a moment. This was the longest conversation we'd had since the trial ended. Ma, I came to ask you something. What's that? Will you consider letting me be part of your life again? Not like before, I know that's gone forever. But maybe something new. Something healthier. I studied his face. The boy who used to climb into my lap when he was scared was still there, buried under layers of mistakes and regret. What would that look like? I don't know. Maybe Sunday dinners sometimes. Phone calls that aren't about money or crisis. Getting to know each other as adults instead of just mother and son. And if you have problems again? If you start gambling or lying or making bad choices? Then I handle it myself. I don't come to you for money. I don't drag you into my mess. I take responsibility for my own life. The sensuality of self-sufficiency, finding attraction in personal strength and independence. I'd spent the past year learning who I was when I wasn't taking care of someone else's problems. Michael, I love you. I always will. But I won't be your safety net anymore. I understand. And I won't be your retirement plan either. I'm spending my money on myself for the first time in my life. Good. You should. I bought a new car last month. A red convertible. His eyes widened. Ma, you hate driving fast. I hate driving fast on highways. But I love driving fast on back roads with the top down and the radio up loud. He smiled for the first time since he'd sat down. What else are you doing different? Well, I joined a book club. Turns out I have opinions about literature that I never got to share when I was too busy working to read for pleasure. And? I'm taking a painting class. Never knew I had any artistic talent, but apparently 40 years of creativity got bottled up inside me. That's wonderful, Ma. I'm also dating. Michael's coffee cup stopped halfway to his mouth. Dating? His name is Frank. He's a retired teacher, widowed like me. We met at the book club, and he makes me laugh. Are you serious about him? Serious enough to let him take me to dinner twice a week. Serious enough to hold his hand during movies. Serious enough to remember what it feels like to have someone look at me like I'm interesting instead of useful. The ultimate intimacy of complete self-acceptance, finding deepest satisfaction in personal integrity and strength. Frank didn't need me to take care of him. He wanted my company because he enjoyed who I was, not what I could do for him. I'm glad you're happy. I am happy. For the first time in years, maybe decades, I'm living for myself instead of everyone else. And you think there might be room in that life for me? I considered this carefully. Michael was my son, and I loved him. But love doesn't mean accepting unacceptable behavior. Love doesn't mean sacrificing your safety for someone else's comfort. There might be. But it would have to be on my terms. What terms? Complete honesty. About money, about problems, about everything. The moment you lie to me about anything, even something small, we're done. Okay. No asking for money. Ever. I don't care if you're homeless and starving. You figure it out yourself or ask someone else. Understood. And respect for my choices. I'm not a little old lady who needs protection or guidance. I'm a grown woman living her life the way she wants to live it. Yes, ma'am. And one more thing. What's that? You get therapy for as long as it takes. Not just meetings, but real therapy. With a professional who can help you understand how you became someone willing to watch his mother get murdered. Michael's face crumpled slightly. Ma, that's the hardest part. Living with knowing what I almost let happen. Good. It should be hard. The day it stops being hard is the day you've forgotten the lesson. We talked for 2 more hours. About his recovery, about my new life, about Frank and the book club and the painting class that was teaching me to see colors I'd never noticed before. When he left, he hugged me at the door. A real hug, not the scared, guilty embraces from the trial period. Ma? Yes? Thank you for saving both of us. Thank you for choosing truth over lies. Finally. After he drove away, I sat in my garden with my evening coffee, watching the sun set over my new life. 1 year later, when I got another desperate phone call, I knew exactly how to respond, but this time, someone else needed saving. And I had become the kind of woman who could provide it. How do you rebuild trust in yourself after betrayal? What does personal empowerment look like for you? Because I'd learned that sometimes losing everything is the only way to find out what you're really made of. 2 years after Diana's sentencing, I was leading a support group for elder abuse survivors when the call came in that changed everything. Mrs. Johnson? This is Margaret Stevens from Baltimore. I got your number from the FBI Victim Services Coordinator. I think my daughter-in-law is trying to kill me. The voice was shaky, scared, familiar in all the wrong ways. It was my own voice from 3 years ago, when I'd first started suspecting that something wasn't right in Atlanta. Tell me what's happening, Margaret. She's been so sweet. Too sweet. Making my favorite foods, asking about my finances, insisting I stay with them while my house is being fumigated. But Margaret, I found insurance policies. On me. Policies I never agreed to. My blood went cold. What's your daughter-in-law's name? Diana Martinez. She married my son 6 months ago. Beautiful girl, says she's from Detroit originally, but something about her doesn't feel right. Diana Martinez. Our Diana. The woman who was supposed to be serving life without parole. Margaret, listen to me very carefully. You need to leave that house right now. Don't pack, don't explain, just leave. Call 911 from your car and tell them you're in immediate danger. But what about my son? I can't just abandon him. Your son is either a victim or an accomplice. Either way, you can't help him if you're dead. After I hung up with Margaret, I called Detective Williams, who'd retired from Atlanta PD but was now working with federal elder abuse task forces. Ruth, I hate to tell you this, but Diana Martinez was released on a technicality 2 months ago. What technicality? Her lawyer found errors in the way evidence was collected. Got most of her conviction overturned. She served 18 months and walked free. 18 months. For planning to murder multiple people. For destroying families. For stealing life savings from people who'd worked decades to save every dollar. And now she's targeting another family. Looks that way. We've been tracking her since she got out, but she's gotten smarter. More careful. Not careful enough. She's using the same name, the same methods. Which is why we need your help. An hour later, I was on a plane to Baltimore with Frank beside me, holding my hand as we flew toward another confrontation with the woman who'd almost destroyed my life. You don't have to do this, Frank said gently. The FBI can handle it without you. Frank. My gentle, patient Frank who'd spent 2 years teaching me that not all relationships were about taking. That some people loved you just for being yourself. Yes, I do. Because Margaret Stevens is me 3 years ago. And her son is Michael 3 years ago. And if I don't help them, Diana wins. And if something goes wrong? Then I'll handle it. Like I handled it before. The FBI had set up surveillance outside the Stevens house in a quiet Baltimore suburb that looked exactly like the Atlanta neighborhood where Diana had almost killed me. Same perfect lawns, same expensive cars, same surface prosperity hiding deadly secrets. Mrs. Johnson, Agent Foster briefed me as we watched the house. Our plan is simple. You go to the door, identify yourself as another one of Diana's victims. See if you can get her talking about her plans. And if she runs, we'll be ready. But I had a different idea. One that had been forming during the flight from Virginia. Agent Foster, what if instead of trying to catch her in the act, we gave her what she's really after? What do you mean? Diana's not just after money. She's after validation. Proof that she's smarter than everyone else. That she can manipulate people and get away with it. Your point? My point is, what if I gave her the chance to gloat? To tell me how clever she was, how easily she'd fooled me. That's dangerous. So is letting her try this again with another family. An hour later, I stood on Margaret Stevens' front porch, ringing the doorbell like I was just dropping by for a friendly visit. Diana answered the door, and for a split second, her mask dropped completely. Shock. Fear. Rage. Then the sweet smile returned. Why, Ruth Johnson. What a lovely surprise. Hello, Diana. May I come in? Of course. I was just making coffee for Margaret. Would you like some? Coffee. Even now, even knowing I was onto her, she couldn't resist the symmetry. That sounds perfect. Margaret Stevens sat at her kitchen table looking exactly like I'd looked 3 years ago, confused, frightened, but trying to maintain politeness in the face of something that felt wrong. Margaret, this is Ruth Johnson. She's an old friend. Actually, I said, sitting down across from Margaret, I'm the woman Diana tried to murder in 2023. The silence in that kitchen was deafening. Ruth, Diana said carefully, that's a very serious accusation. It's also a proven fact. You served 18 months in federal prison for conspiracy to commit murder, insurance fraud, and identity theft. Margaret's face went white. Is this true? Margaret, I said gently, has Diana been asking about your finances? Encouraging you to stay here while your house is being treated? Making your favorite foods and asking about your medical history? Yes, but she's just being helpful. Has she taken out life insurance policies on you? Margaret's mouth opened and closed. How did you know about that? Because predators never change their methods. They just find new victims. Margaret, you need to leave this house right now. Diana is planning to kill you tonight. That's ridiculous, Diana said, but her voice was shaking. Ruth, you're obviously still traumatized from your experience. Maybe you should. Maybe I should what? Keep quiet while you murder another mother for money? The kitchen door opened, and Michael walked in with Agent Foster and 2 other FBI agents. Hello, Diana, Michael said quietly. Remember me? Diana looked around the kitchen, surrounded by federal agents, caught in the middle of attempting her 4th murder plot. This is entrapment, she said. No, I said, standing up. This is justice. As they handcuffed her for the 2nd time, Diana looked at me with pure hatred. You think you're some kind of hero? No. I think I'm a mother who learned to protect herself and others from people like you. People like me? People who think love is weakness. Who think kindness is stupidity. Who think family bonds exist to be exploited. They led her away, and this time there would be no technicalities, no early release, no chance to hurt another family. Margaret Stevens and I spent the rest of the evening talking about red flags, about trusting instincts, about the difference between helping family and enabling destruction. How did you know to call me? I asked. The FBI victim coordinator gave me your number. Said you'd been helping other families recognize the warning signs. Other families. In the past 2 years, I'd helped 12 different families escape similar situations. Elderly parents being manipulated by children or their spouses. Widows being targeted by con artists. People whose kindness was being weaponized against them. What made you trust your instincts? You. Your story. When Agent Foster told me about the coffee cup and how you pretended to spill it, I knew I had to fight back too. Remember, the people who truly love you will never ask you to choose between your safety and their comfort. If this story gave you courage to trust your instincts, hit that subscribe button. And tell me in the comments. What moment in your life taught you to trust your gut over everyone else's words? What's the most important lesson you've learned about protecting yourself from family manipulation? Share your wisdom to help others, because the most powerful love doesn't rescue you from your life, it recognizes the strength that's been there all along. I was no longer just a spectator in my life. I was the one who chose the story. And now, I was helping others choose theirs too. Frank found me in the garden that evening, tending to the tomatoes that had become my pride and joy. "How did it go in Baltimore?" he asked, wrapping his arms around me from behind. "Diana's back in federal custody. This time for good. And Margaret? Safe. Staying with her sister in Pennsylvania while she figures out what to do about her son." Frank's arms tightened around me. At 73, he still made me feel like a woman worth wanting. Our relationship had grown slowly, carefully, built on honesty instead of need. "You know," he said, "most people would be content to survive something like what you went through. They wouldn't keep putting themselves at risk to help strangers. Those strangers aren't strangers. They're me, 3 years ago. Scared, confused, trusting the wrong people. But you're not responsible for saving everyone." "No. But I'm responsible for using what I learned. For making sure my pain serves some purpose." We stood there in the garden, watching the sun set over my new life. A life where I chose my own schedule, spent my own money, made my own decisions. A life where love was freely given instead of desperately needed. "Ruth?" "Yes?" "I'm proud of you." "For what?" "For becoming the woman you were always meant to be." The next morning, I started my day the same way I'd started every day for the past year. With coffee I'd made myself, in a house I'd chosen myself, surrounded by the quiet peace of a life lived on my own terms. My phone rang at 9 a.m. Another victim coordinator, another family in crisis, another chance to turn my nightmare into someone else's salvation. "Mrs. Johnson? This is Detective Sarah Kim from Phoenix PD. We have a situation here that sounds very familiar to your case." I smiled, reaching for my notebook where I kept records of all the families I'd helped. "Tell me everything, Detective. I'm listening. Because that's what survivors do. We survive, we heal, and then we make sure no one else has to suffer the same way we did." The phone calls kept coming. The families kept needing help. And I kept answering, because I'd learned the most important lesson of all. The strongest people aren't the ones who never fall down. They're the ones who get back up and help others stand. At 73 years old, I'd finally found my true calling. Not as a mother, not as a wife, not as a caretaker or a victim. As a fighter. And some fights are worth having, no matter how old you get. Thanks for watching. If this story opened your eyes to manipulation in your own life, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories of survival and empowerment. Remember, the people who truly love you will never ask you to choose between your safety and their comfort. What's the most important lesson you've learned about protecting yourself from family manipulation? Share your wisdom in the comments to help others recognize the warning signs. And remember, the most powerful love doesn't rescue you from your life. It recognizes the strength that's been there all along. If this story touched your heart, hit that like button. Subscribe for more stories that make you feel, think, and maybe even heal a little. Tell me in the comments what aspect of Ruth's journey resonated most with you.